Blog Talk Radio.
Well, hello everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you back to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder, and it's just me flying solo this evening during the week. I know we've had a lot of recent shows on Revolution Radio. Gosh, I lose track of time so easily. Maybe I've been back there about a year, and I usually post the programs from Revolution Radio on Ohio Exopolitics or the Blog Talk station, and it's been a while since I've just logged into Blog Talk, and I felt kind of bad, and maybe I should almost apologize about this. It's been so long since I talked about any of these topics like Atlantis and Lemuria, and I won't even probably be covering these in super great depth today, but I thought I would talk a little bit about them anyway. The history of Earth, according to the Meyer information, is very fascinating. It's also very complicated. And I'm going to take us just back 150,000 years ago. About 150,000 years ago, there was a scientist named Pelagon, and he lived in the Pleiadian system. If you're new to the program, Billy Meyer has had contacts with a group of extraterrestrials called the Pleiadian. They live some 80 light years beyond our Pleiades in a different space-time configuration. Our universe has 7 different space-time configurations in it. And in all of these different space-time configurations, you see planets and stars and galaxies just like ours. The Pleiadian live some 80 light years beyond our Pleiades, and then into this other space-time configuration. These extraterrestrials have the ability to jump from star to star with almost no time passing, and they can also move from space-time configuration to space-time configuration. And for example, in our material belt of our universe, there are 7 different space-time configurations. There are 7 different belts in our universe, and they counter-rotate against one another. The 4th belt is our material belt, and that's where all the galaxies and the stars and the planets exist. And then there are subdivided there 7 different space-time configurations, and it's kind of like this. There's a Lyra Vega in our space-time configuration, and there's another Lyra Vega in another space-time configuration. Well, Era doesn't exist in the same space-time configuration as Earth. So maybe I'll leave that there for now. But there was a very highly evolved extraterrestrial human named Pelagon, who I've read a lot of interesting things about. Someday I'm going to have to track these down, exactly where I heard this. I've heard part of this from Randy Winters, who used to talk about the Meyer case. And I might have read part of this from his book or part from these old contact reports. But Pelagon was extremely advanced. He was what you might call a king of wisdom or an Ishwish. And in the Meyer information, there's a whole category for these kinds of people. He was said to be able to float. The guy could do telekinesis with his own body. He could, I've heard rumors, stories, or whatever, and read things that he could cause plants to grow with the power of his mind. He was highly, highly evolved. And then human beings have 7 different evolutionary steps. We here on Earth are on step 2, which is called rational life. These Pleiadian are in step 5, which is called life and creational wisdom. And some of them were in step 5 150,000 years ago. So that gives you a kind of frame of reference for who these people are. So this Ishwish named Pelagon elected himself kind of the leader of, there were 70,000 people that followed him, and he took possession of what you might call some of these motherships, and he fled his home world. And he traveled not only through space, but through these different space-time configurations to get to Earth. This is about 150,000 years ago. He had with him 200 scientists. And one of these scientists, I believe, was named Semyaza, not Semyasi like Billy's contact, but this was actually a man. And it may have been, well, I forget, so I may not comment on that. But Semyaza is part of this story because he mated with an Earth woman, which they weren't supposed to do. There was a kind of human being developing on Earth naturally at this time. And that in itself is a very long story because the people from Lyra Vega came to the Earth before Pelagon. In fact, several 100,000 years before Pelagon. And they committed certain crimes when they were here. And they were punished by their own people. And they were banished to the Earth. And they die on the Earth, okay? These highly, highly advanced people from Lyra Vega died on the Earth. Some of them, a small cross-section. And then they reincarnate on the Earth in a much less evolved society, which I've always thought would be subconsciously a great torment. A real punishment, I would think, in some ways. So anyway, Pelagon has come here to the Earth. He brings 200 scientists with him, and for thousands of years on Earth, there was peace. And the society that was here were extraterrestrial humans, not native Earth humans. And after Pelagon died, the leader that took over for him wasn't so good. So there was a gigantic war, a world war, which was tremendous in scale, horrible, devastating to the Earth. And only a few thousand people escaped the destruction. Some of these fled off into space to other worlds, some strange worlds. And for quite a long time, many centuries, I will say the Earth was just avoided. And the people that remained were scrounging, trying to live. But about 133,000 years ago, some people came back to the Earth. Now, these people were led by a king of wisdom named Atlant, who was married to a woman named Karyatide. And they settled on Atlantis, what they called, there was an island continent, I believe it was between what you might call North America and maybe Africa. And Atlant had a wife, again, named Karyatide. And they started to develop this city of Atlantis. Atlant married another what you will call an Ishrish, a female Ishwish. And Atlant was a man of obvious Lyrian descent. He had broad shoulders and white skin. And eventually, another man came to the Earth named, and I believe his name was Muras. And I think it was the cousin of Karyatide, who was Atlant's wife. And he built the city of Mu, which I sometimes call Lemuria. And it was built near the Gobi Desert. And there were two underground cities at Mu, one called Agartha Alpha, and the other was Agartha Beta. And these two underground cities were connected by tunnels, it's my understanding that they may still be there. So, in the cities of Atlantis and Lemuria were built on different continents. And these were according to this information, I don't know if this is still true or not, but Greater Atlantis and Mu were the largest cities ever built on Earth. So these two cultures were highly developed. They began to flourish. And I think the peace lasted for about 2,000 years. And for some reason, you see this repeating theme that stuck with me, is that these scientists degenerated over time, and they got a thirst for power, and they started to stir up trouble for Atlantis. Eventually, again, the people of Atlantis resisted these scientists and fought against these scientists. And this occurred about 133,000 years ago. And they left the Earth again, these scientists did, and they went to a neighboring solar system and produced many descendants, developed high technologies, and they developed very long lifespans of about 2,000 years. And they came back to Earth, and they had a leader named Eris the Barbarian. And he had 200 leaders and sub-leaders, just like Pelagon. And one of his, and I may have confused this earlier, but one of his leaders was Semyasa, who mated with an Earth woman. So it was Semyasa was not associated with Pelagon, but it was associated with Eris and worked for Eris. This is interesting. This is talked about in greater detail in Contact Report 9. And I don't know if I can find anything. Yeah, we'll come back to Contact Report 9. But this is very, very interesting. And we can talk about that a little bit more. So we've got the civilization associated with Pelagon 150,000 years ago. When Pelagon died, it all kind of collapsed into a horrific world war, and these people left the Earth and they escaped, the few that were still alive. And then about 133,000 years ago, Atlant and his wife Karyatide came to the Earth, built Atlantis. Muras came to the Earth, built Mu. Mu was in the Gobi Desert, and Atlantis was on the continent of Atlantis. And then this guy comes from another solar system. His name is Eris. He brings 200 leaders and sub-leaders with him, tries to take over Atlantis, and he's driven off the Earth. But eventually, this brutal leader named Eris the Barbarian comes back, and he starts this war between Atlantis and Lemuria. So the Atlanteans had this incredible armada of ships. They had they had an army of about 5 million people. And they had over 100,000 of these ships. And what they did, they melted the city of Lemuria to the ground. The part that was on top of the Earth in the Gobi Desert was melted. It was destroyed. Now, I think Agartha Alpha and Agartha Beta were still there. So there were a few scientists at Mu who were able to escape that attack. And they found a what you might call a planetoid or an asteroid in the asteroid belt that was part of the destroyed planet Millennia. And they attached both an atomic and an electromagnetic drive to it. And they pushed it back towards the Earth with a tremendous power. So it became a weapon, this asteroid, for lack of a better word. It's large enough to be called a planetoid, I think. But they brought this back and they steered it. And they pushed it out of its orbit and they steered it towards Earth. And when this asteroid came into our atmosphere, it looked something like a great falling star. However, it appeared larger and larger, and it had what you might call an unbearable howling sound. So the people at Atlantis, they thought that they had wiped Mu out, but the counterpunch was coming in the form of this great asteroid that produced this unbearable howling sound and this fantastic heat. Now, again, this asteroid was gotten by some scientists that were still alive and still remaining at Lemuria, at Mu. And they brought this planetoid back to the Earth, and it produced a fantastic heat. It started to glow like a supernova. It produced tens of thousands of degrees of heat when it was in our asteroid, in our atmosphere. It was creating unbearable howling sounds. And at one point, it finally exploded about 172 kilometers up. And all of these thousands of smaller meteors were produced. And almost like they hit the Earth with each one of these meteors was like almost the power of an atomic blast. So this is a horrific scene that I'm describing here. This happened, my understanding was that this happened about 12,000 years ago. So I don't know all the intervening time because the Atlanteans started their civilization about 133,000 years ago. So there's a gigantic story here that I'm obviously not telling. But anyway, back to our asteroid. It split up into two major parts. There were many, many other parts that were like mini bombs that hit the Earth, mini atomic bombs. And these two parts were like two great fists that slammed into the Atlantic Ocean, tore the crust of the Earth, and caused magma to enter into the ocean. And this caused a tremendous tidal wave. Let's use the term tidal wave for lack of a better description. So this and that eventually wiped out Atlantis. So now we can trace this back to our time. So 133,000 years ago, Atlant came to the Earth and settled and made the settlement of Atlantis. There was about 1,800 years of peace. Some scientists stirred up a war. They left the Earth. I think they went to Beta Centauri. About 113,000 years ago, they came back to stir up more trouble. And eventually, the great asteroid that I described earlier hit the Earth about 12,000 years ago. And this is a thing that's confirmed by our scientists today. There was a great disaster that occurred on the Earth about 13,000 years ago. And there are parts of even the Great Pyramid which are melted from this. And Brian Forster talks about this. So anyway, let's start from about 12,000 years ago, after the devastation of the Earth. So what happened is the Earth got knocked off its axis. And before then, the North Pole area was called Hyperborea. And it was beautiful. It had tremendously warm weather. It was fantastic. And it just so happens that that area is where Florida used to be. And then when the great meteor hit the Earth got set on its axis. So now Florida is where it is now. And now we have seasons because not all the planet gets light the way it should. And we probably lost part of our atmosphere too when this great disaster occurred. So after the great disaster that wiped out Atlantis and Lemuria, and after the Earth got knocked off its axis, there was a horrible period where people were just scrounging to survive. I don't know how long this lasted, probably centuries. But people did survive. People still survive. And there's a large gap of time here. So extraterrestrials eventually did come back to the Earth. And these extraterrestrials that came back were in the lineage of Eris the barbarian, who stirred up the Great War. And these were the people that took rulership of the Earth. So the first guy who was on the Earth, an extraterrestrial, human, and he came back, and all that was left on Earth were people who had lost the great history of Atlantis and Lemuria. You know, it had been centuries. They didn't really know anything anymore. They didn't have any technology. They didn't have any real history. They went back to the Stone Age, and here comes a man named Eris the 11th, and he sets up a rulership, a tyranny over these Earth people, and he rules for hundreds of years. As a cruel tyrant, he creates a religion he demands to be worshipped, and he's murdered by his son, Jehovah. Now, Jehovah ruled the Earth until about 3,660 years ago. Now, I say the term Jehovah, but at that time it was most likely pronounced Yahovah, because I'll just leave it at that. We can get into that a little bit later if possible. But Jehovah, again, let himself be called the creator. He was a tyrant over these Earth people, told them a lot of lies, created a religion so he could be worshipped. And he was murdered. Jehovah was murdered by his son, Jehav, about 340 years into his reign. So I don't know how long Jehovah had been alive, but he had been alive longer than 340 years because he reigned for 340 years, and he was killed by his son. Now, Jehav, he was a megalomaniac as well. He demanded that the Earth people worship him. He demanded that he was proclaimed as creator, and there were probably big problems with people that didn't worship him. So there was a son. Jehav had a son named Erisane, who murdered his father. And this Erisane was the guy that eventually he wanted to really solidify this religion, and he wanted to take control. And he wanted to take all the power that his father had and advance this religion even more and more. But he had two brothers, Ptah and Salam, who didn't want him to do that and thought that was wrong. And Ptah and Salam got together enough forces to force Erisane and his 72,000 followers off the Earth. And after decades, maybe hundreds of years, I don't know exactly how long Erisane was gone, He returned with his 72,000 followers, and they went to these old cubicle constructions below the Giza Plateau. And these old cubicle constructions had been there for 70,000 years. And that's when, at that point, Erisane became the leader of a group that was called the Giza Intelligences. And he ruled until about 3010 BCE. Now, Hen, who was called Yahovah, which we pronounce as Jehovah now, took over Erisane's rule. Now, Hen, this is 2080 BC. Hen, also known today as Jehovah by most people, took over rule for Erisane. And he is the God of the Old Testament, according to the Maya information. So, I know this is a really shocking, abhorrent, horrible thing to say if you're involved in religion, but this is at least how the Maya material presents it. So Hen was the guy that wiped out Sodom and Gomorrah. Hen was the leader of the religion of the Old Testament, according to Maya information. And eventually, he too was forced out of power by his nephew, Kamagal. And there was a Kamagal the first and a Kamagal the second. And they lived long enough to bring us all the way back to modern times, which would be about 1976. And these Giza intelligences, they interacted with Hitler during World War II. They had a guy, what was his name? Eric Janssen. I think that's what he called himself, but that wasn't his real name. And he was under the influence of these Giza intelligences through kind of a telenotic impulse, which was a hypnotic kind of thing, which is still affecting our Earth. Even those Giza intelligences are gone. We today are still affected by that. But Hermann Steinschneider was the guy's real name, and he interacted with Hitler, but his real name was Eric Janssen. And these Giza intelligences, through this Hermann Steinschneider, screwed up Hitler really bad. Hitler would not have done all the horrific things that he did if it were not for Hermann Steinschneider. So, just a few side notes quickly, and then I'm going to leave Atlantis and Lemuria and talk a little bit about the Might of Thoughts. It actually feels kind of good to talk about Atlantis and Lemuria for a while. I haven't really done that in quite a while. But I talked about Semyasa, who was one of the 200 leaders and sub-leaders under Eris. And in Randy Winter's book, he seems to be saying that Semyasa was doing some kind of genetic experiments at this time. But Semyasa mated with an Earth woman who evidently had some genetics of the Lyrian people. In any case, the Earth, there was an offspring named Adam. And it says in the contact notes that the descendant of this act was of male sex and a human being of good form. And Semyasa called him Adam, which has the meaning earth human being. Now, according to the Pleiadian Mission book by Randy Winters, which is a kind of a weak interpretation of some of the Maya information. According to that book, it says that Adam was 16 feet tall. And that may be accurate, in fact. Now, in Contact Report 7, it talks about some of the extraterrestrials in general terms that were on the Earth here. And they had a very huge range in size. Some of them were 50 centimeters. Other of them were 39 feet tall. So a centimeter is equal to about 0.39 inches. So these extraterrestrials, some of them were only 19 inches tall. Some of them were 39 feet tall. The largest, the offspring, the genetic, and some of this was genetic experiments possibly too. So this is another aspect of the whole Lyra Vega, Atlantis, and Lemuria story. So there's just a quick overview of some of the Earth history from the aspect of the Maya information. Now, it's even more complicated than that, but at least we've got a quick overview of this information. I thought I lost this information. It scared me when I was trying to put some things together for this show. So that was Atlantis and Lemuria. This is just to kind of get you reoriented to Earth history, which is very fascinating. But you'll find the more you study the Maya information, let me recommend some of his books, The Might of Thoughts, The Way to Live, The Talmud of Emmanuel, The Psyche. You'll find that no matter how interesting that other information is, the stuff that you need every day is in these other books. And so people that will listen to this have heard me talk about the Might of Thoughts probably many times and how important it is. And I also talk very much about the early life of Edward Albert Meyer. He started to get telepathic messages right around 1943, something like that. And these were from Svath. Svath was an extraterrestrial human being who was going to be Billy's mentor. And there are a couple reasons he was Billy's mentor. Is these extraterrestrials, they have a technology that allows them to identify spirit forms, to kind of track spirit forms. And they knew that the spirit form in Edward Albert Meyer, this young boy in Switzerland, was very, very ancient. And they had seen it incarnate on the earth as the people that we call Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, and Muhammad. And they knew that in each one of these previous lives, this line of reincarnating prophets taught what's called the teaching of the Spirit. And part of the earth peoples in different places recorded to the best of their ability this information. I don't even know if I should use the term to the best of their ability. It was mostly distorted, very, very distorted. Some of that accidentally, some of that intentionally. And that became the basis for all of our religions. Islam, Judaism, Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism were all influenced by those prophets I just described. But it's not until our current generation that this guy incarnates again. Of course, the earth has no idea of that. And only a very few people right now understand the significance of his lifetime, Billy's lifetime right now. And it's because his spirit form is 9.6 billion years old. He's just a regular guy, but his spirit form is very, very ancient. That's his spiritual consciousness It's older than the Earth by billions of the years. So he's lived a long time and has a lot of experience that's accumulated in his spirit form through these many, many, many reincarnations. And one of the major things that he's doing in this lifetime is teaching something called the creational natural laws. And there are certain creational natural laws in the universe. One of them is love. Love is the highest of the creational natural laws. It's the most important, and in some ways it's very, very misunderstood, because the kind of love that we're talking about is a love that is not based on romance. It's a love that's based on a kind of thinking, let's say, an appreciation. That kind of thinking is more based on respect than anything else. So love is the highest principle in all creation, and through it, everything exists in absolute logic. So the intelligence behind our universe is not a personality, and that's where we kind of, in our limited understanding, that's overwhelming for our consciousness, because we have a personality. Our animals have a personality. Everything except plants on the earth have a personality. So that's why sometimes I say, when I think of creation, I think more of a forest or trees, because these things are very neutral. And even though they're loving in their own way, I mean, the love of creation is the most profound love of all. But it's a love we don't really have a way. I mean, it takes some real work on our part to try to understand that, because we always understand love as being something that's personable. It has a personality. It's romantic. No. It's the most effective love. It's the highest form of love. It's based on respect and veneration. That's the first creational natural law. And you notice it says that the love is the highest principle in all creation. So it's a principle. It's an idea. It's a concept. It also is not, it's effective, it's not affective. And Billy has a wonderful writing in Love Letter. It's called Love Letter 27. And that has all these wonderful poetic things to say about the love of creation. And in Love Letter 27 it says, the infinite love of creation connects all life, because in all life this love lies hidden. So love, again, is the first creational natural law. And that's what the spirit teaching is about. It's infinite. Love is infinite, cannot be measured. The love of creation is infinite. And this love that I'm talking about is based on a deep respect. And creation, it's a neutral, positive, spiritual energy. It has no personality. It radiates an infinite love. It's everywhere. It creates all things, both the physical as well as the spiritual. So again, love is the highest principle of creation. And through it, everything exists in absolute logic. And the love of creation is everywhere, because without it, nothing would be able to exist. So the creation, this superintelligence that is really behind our universe, there's There's not a God in the sense that the religions have taught us for years. This love is coming from a spiritual intelligence, a neutral spiritual intelligence that is genderless and has no it has no personality. It's not a human being. It is not. It's learning. It's evolving. So we as individuals should be aware that we exist only through the love of creation, and that we carry this love within ourselves. And creation created everything in love and logic. So love is the highest principle in all creation. Everything exists in an absolute logic. We have this love in ourselves. And creation created everything in love and logic and put that love in all creatures. So life itself is love. This is the way things were designed. Now today we don't know these laws. We don't follow the first law, which is true love, not romantic love, effective love. So even if living in this world seems to consist of conflict and drudgery, the fact that it was not set up like this is still true. Now, Billy, as a young boy, started to know these principles intuitively just by looking at the stars. And he also had memories of his previous lives. Like he said, I looked at my hands and my body and could only vaguely recognize them. So I touched my body and felt it. And then I heard my own voice say, and this is Billy speaking, my life is made out of the love of creation. And I could not explain why I said that and what power led me to speak these words. A slight shiver came over me, although the night was quite warm. And then I noticed that I also felt peculiar. Nevertheless, I was not frightened. This is Billy, and this it occurred back in 1941 on one night in May. He's about 4 years old. And again, he says, I looked up to the stars, and I recognized that the stars were distant suns in the vast outer space, and that these shone by means of their own power, by themselves, even though they were created from the light of the love of creation, as is everything in the whole universe. And again, the origins of which I could not decipher. So he starts to say more things as this is a 4-year-old boy. And he's influenced by the subconscious memories. He probably cannot recall consciously. And this is like, when the spirit form comes out of the spirit realm, we all have a spirit form. And it comes out of the spirit realm and it brings with it a new consciousness, a new material consciousness. So we have a spiritual consciousness and a material consciousness. It's one of the most important distinctions you have to make. So your spiritual consciousness is ancient, probably about 4.5 million years old if you're the typical Earth human. Billy's is 9.6 billion years old. So that's the difference. So your consciousness, your spiritual consciousness, has had many, many lifetimes. And your subconscious is programmed with wisdom. And the goal is to gain more wisdom with each lifetime. And then we evolve our consciousness. That's the whole point of life. So let me just read this. It's just so profound and so beautiful. And I looked up to the stars, and I recognized that the stars were distant suns in the vast outer space, and that these shone by means of their own power by themselves, even though they were created from the light of the love of creation, as is everything in the whole universe. So if you want to try to understand the love of creation, one of the things you can do is look at the sun too, because it radiates light, it radiates heat. That light goes into the ocean, causes the photosynthesis that allows plants to live. Small fish can feed off the plants, larger fish can feed off the smaller fish. It's all because of the love of creation. The light of the sun is very much like the love of creation, because the sun has no personality, yet it brings light to everything. Now, our sun is a yellow sun that is just the right kind of sun to develop life. And there are 2.6 million highly developed civilizations in our Milky Way galaxy, about 7 million solar systems, which can produce higher life. According to my information, that's where, of course, this all comes from. But so if you're having trouble understanding a universal consciousness that has no personality, you can start to get a glimpse of that by looking at the sun and understanding, well, this is, someone's going to ask, is the sun conscious then? The generic response would be, from a scientist today, would be no, but I'm not so sure that that's correct. So I started on the creational natural law of love, and we are going into great depth on the creation and understanding what love is. The second law is striving. And this striving is the key to one of the keys to your happiness. It's the fundamental law of all evolution. Without striving, there is no life. You will not be happy if you're not striving. Your striving could be cleaning out your closet, which I've been doing lately. That kind of striving can really produce a lot of satisfaction. You'd be surprised. But let me read a little bit about striving from one of Billy's books called The Way to Live. You see how quickly we go from Atlantis Lemuria to practical day-to-day things. So, as is the case with the creation itself, every single vasen, any single personality, living being of any kind, from the very first breath to its very last, also strives for that which is higher, for evolution and completion. So you may be writing a computer program, or as I was yesterday, digging a grave for my dear old friend, my dog that I had to put to sleep. Those are both different kinds of striving. And every moment in the existence of a vasen, a living being, is as much directed at striving as the entire being of the creation itself. So it's our very nature to strive as human beings. Do not allow yourself to be pulled away from striving. One of the biggest interruptions is our televisions, our cell phones, our internet. Do not become a slave to these things. Step away from these things. Study the Maya information. Meditate. Work outside. Do something towards striving, because that's where your real satisfaction is going to come. Creation itself, as well as all its creatures and vase and height, are imbued with the power of striving. We have the power of striving within us. Striving in order to attain success, the future, progress, and that which is higher. Striving is the power of the spiritual as well as the physical, and striving is an incontrovertible creational law in order to reach through incessant evolution that which is higher and absolutely fully developed. It's called the law of all creation. So your life was much happier if you can focus on striving. Now, let me give you a little hint that I've found anyway, is that meditation goes very well with striving. And meditation provides a kind of rest. And you can do a meditation rest as well, which is kind of what I do. And what I often do is I will visualize, and this isn't exactly the way Billy does it. If you're doing it exactly the way Billy says to do, that's the way to go. This is my sloppy rendition of what I do in my meditation a lot, is I'll visualize a blue sky, and often I'll see, some swirly white clouds in there. And next I'll see a green hillside or kind of a greenish mountainside. And next I'll see a sun, a yellow sun, and it'll eventually set and becomes an orange and then a red sun peeking up over the hills. And then the whole thing turns into a red rose. And Billy talks about the meditation on the red rose. And I'll meditate on the red rose, hold that visualization in my mind. Do not allow any verbal thoughts. If any verbal thoughts come in, go right back to the red rose. What we're trying to do is get rid of all verbal thought and visualize only. And that'll put you in kind of what you might call a theta state. You're almost asleep at this point. You're in a very relaxed state. And this is also a good time to take 2 or 3 deep breaths, like you can say. Take a lot of air in. Let all that stress out. Exhale. Do the same thing again. Exhale again. Inhale. Let all that stress out. Let all that fragmented energy out. Breathing is one of the best things you can do. So now you're relaxed. I lay in a recliner a lot when I do this. And I try to before I start, I'll look at the watch and just get a frame of reference for what the time is. And then after I've gone through the various steps of the visualization from the blue sky to the green hillside to the sun and the clouds and the setting sun and then the rose, I will. If I get to that point and I'm feeling right, I'll let myself visualize other things. I might go walk around mentally, walk around my house, walk around outside, go to places nearby that I like to know about. Now, I live by a forest, so I'm quite fortunate. But then you'll be in a meditative state. And meditate for at least 15 minutes if you can hang in there and do it. Now, if you get good at it, you can go a whole lot longer. It can last hours. In fact, I find that I'm in a deeper relaxation than I am even during sleep. Because there's something about holding that, I'll call it a theta state. I don't know if that's the correct terminology. But it's the state just before you go to sleep, where you're just barely conscious, but you're still there somewhat. It's a very blissful state. And if you can do that for 15, 20 minutes, get up and then go back to striving. And then do the same thing for 15 or 20 minutes again. Go back through the same visualization. If you're using Billy's technique, do his. His is better than mine. This is my own silly stuff that I started doing for some reason. And I made a big mistake by not doing it more often, because even as much, I tell you, we eat too much because we lack energy. Sometimes food will give us a sense of energy for a short period of time. And a lot of times what we need is the meditation, the true relaxation. And spending too much time on media will also drain your body a whole lot. Stay away from this stuff. I gotta use it to do the show, and I use it for the website. But anyway, we've run out of time. It's about an hour. It's good to reconnect, and I appreciate the folks that have been sending me messages and telling me they've are enjoying the show. It's hard to tell when you do these shows exactly what is going on out in the world where people are listening. So anyway, I think this is having impact. I had some messages not long ago, and maybe I'll just close the show with this real quickly. Some important things to tell yourself. I'm confident, and this comes from the Mighty Thoughts book. I'm confident, I'm optimistic, I'm relaxed, I'm cheerful, I'm enthusiastic. I'm the master of my own destiny, the forger of my own fortune. I create my own good luck. I do not allow my thoughts to drift. I steer my thoughts like a captain steers his ship. I nurture my thoughts. I strengthen my thoughts. I clarify my thoughts. I organize my thoughts. It is the nature of the thoughts that by their might alone, every conceivable thing can be brought to fruition. Every thought is enlivened by might and power, and must as a cause also bring a quite certain effect. The effect of the thought is directly proportional to its might and power. My consciousness is like a garden filled with flourishing plants. The negative and the positive are two forces which belong together because they depend on one another and should never be separated. And the human should never think in needy terms, because thoughts like words live. And as a rule, suffering is an effect of some form of wrong thinking. And incidents of suffering in the life are indicators that the law of harmony has been broken and disregarded. When tangled ideas confuse the thoughts and cause them to go abruptly from one extreme to another, and cause a misdirection of the thoughts, which triggers emotions and can lead to murder and manslaughter. So these are just a few things that you can memorize that will help you in dealing with the pressures of day-to-day. But I'll end maybe with this. And this would be, it is necessary to search for the source of the life power and develop the power in order to have a reliable life potential on which one can depend, therefore in which one can completely trust. So the life power comes from controlling your thoughts, staying neutral positive, meditating, striving, these kinds of things. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the show. We've got about 90 seconds left. You've been listening to Ohio Exopolitics, and I'm your host, Mark Snyder. Have a great evening.